Hey everybody, welcome to the Face-to-Face Ministries podcast, the #1 resource for learning what it means to have a healed heart, connect more deeply with Jesus, and experience true and lasting transformation in your life. I'm one of your hosts, Kathy Little.
And I'm your other host, Melinda Wilson. Please hit subscribe so you don't miss the fresh content we're continuing to release. And while you're at it, we greatly appreciate your help in getting the word out by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a quick review. You can also keep up with us by following our social media by searching face-to-faceministries.org on Facebook. That's no spaces, no numbers, and no caps. And on Instagram at face-to-face-min, and that's all one word.
We want to invite you to join us in our free Face-to-Face Heart Healing Network and in our premium network. Be part of a growing community of people just like you who are wanting to dive deeper into what it means to access the full benefits package of the cross and learning how to help others do the same.
Our team also offers one-on-one ministry sessions that can be done virtually, and you can also learn how to help others connect with Jesus and find healing in their lives through training we offer in the ministry model we use. And for more information about all of the resources, trainings, and events that we offer, visit face-to-faceministries.org. And while you're there, please sign up for our newsletter.
All right, so let's dive into today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 110.
You know, we always have to look back on our podcast app, right, to see what episode number it is. Because, well, now it's easy to lose track because we're doing it every other week. But yeah, 110, who would have thought? Yeah. I still want to get to 1 million downloads. Do you think it's possible? Let me just ask.
Well, it is possible if people share the podcast. That's the key. We actually have a friend that has a podcast, and he just topped over a
That's
million,
what inspired me.
Yeah.
Yep,
I mean, we thought 100,000 was pretty awesome, and then all of a sudden we're over it, like by a lot. So keep on coming.
Yep.
Keep sharing it with your friends, and we're going to do our part to keep providing content. I do want to let everybody know that we are going to take the month of December probably sort of off.
Why is that, Kathy?
Well, because we are getting ready to move cross country from Sacramento, California, all the way to the upstate Greenville, South Carolina area. And this is happening in December. And
of 2021.
Right. Yes. December of 2021. So if you are listening to this, we are just about to head east. And so that's going to be a bit of a time possessor for us, time consumer. So we're probably not going to be releasing content, and you guys are going to be busy with the holidays anyway, and it's a fantastic opportunity to circle back and re-listen to some or catch up on some that you missed. So
and
definitely.
Even though we're not releasing any in December, we have two awesome. The podcast goes on.
Yes.
You know what I mean. It goes on.
We actually have
scenes,
to
but
do the interviews before we release them.
One that we've been waiting for 2 months, and another, both of them for 2 months.
Yeah.
Actually 3, and they're going to be pretty special. Just saying.
Yeah, going to be a great start to season 4, which we will launch in January. Very excited. Also, we are getting ready to release some merchandise. We're going to have some t-shirts and coffee mugs with some pretty cool stuff on them. Looking forward to having that available. And we actually have one special design for Christmas. So we'll make sure that you guys know when that is released. We've got this podcast episode, and then part 2 of the interview that we're doing today, we're going to release in 2 weeks, and then we're going to take some time off. So hopefully we're going to have that store up and running by the end of the month and be able to get you guys some access to that for maybe some Christmas presents you might want to get for yourself or a friend.
Yeah, definitely some really creative, cool ideas. So we're looking forward to having you check that out. And, you know, just a real quick other thing of why we're taking a little bit of time off is yes, this huge move. We're not only moving, but I just moved my elderly, and it's hard for me to say that because I don't feel old enough to have an elderly parent, but my dad is almost 88 and 82-year-old stepmom from one end of California to the other, and it is arduous. It is very stressful. One of the top 10 stressors for 20-year-olds, and then add 60 years plus to that.
Yep.
And I'm telling you, even our process of this is hefty, and I'm not 80, not anywhere close. You know how old I am. Yes. But to move, it was very, very hard to.
It's intense.
It's very intense, and I came back, and it took me about a week to recover from that.
It was a suddenly too, because everything was in a holding pattern, and then all of a sudden they had this house open up for them in Southern California near Melinda's stepbrother and sister-in-law, which is actually a really good move for them because they're going to be close to some family members. But I'm sure many of you have been through this season with elderly parents, and the roles reverse, and then the parent becomes the child,
taking
and vice
responsibility.
versa.
Calling the cable company, canceling their cable, sending their cable boxes back, getting them set up on the other end, all those details. And I told Kathy when I got back that I'm never again going to say I'm not a detail person or an admin person, because I'm both when push comes to shove. And I was awesome. I got to say.
And while you're doing all of that for your dad and stepmom, I'm doing that for us because we are completely. I don't know.
In the middle.
Crazy.
In the middle of me helping them move, we got this house for us.
We had a suddenly too. I hope you guys have seen our newsletter. If you haven't, it's actually also posted on our Facebook page. Go check that out because God is doing something really amazing. This house came up out of nowhere. It ticks every box that we had, not just what we needed, but what we wanted. Really excited about what God's doing. He's already bringing others, like-minded people around us, and excited for us to come. And so it's going to be a huge, huge shift for us geographically, but we really feel like God is definitely proving himself in the middle of this, and we're really excited about that. But in the midst of that, there is the grieving of letting go, being in California.
Absolutely.
And even good changes. This is important. Even really good, positive things that you look forward to require you to grieve something else, because you can't grab onto the next thing until you release the thing that you've had. And so it is a process. So we appreciate you guys praying for us. There's a lot of transition, a lot of adjusting, a lot of travel, a lot of miles on the car, and getting from the West Coast to the East Coast. And I do want to send a shout out to all of you who have donated toward this relocation. We've had an amazing response from you guys, just sowing into the ministry and the relocation. And, you guys are getting this content. We're providing this for you at no charge to you. So if you want to jump in and sow into that as well, sow into the ministry and what God is doing. And we would love to have you do that. You just go to our website, facetofaceministries.org/give, and you can find all the ways to give. The relocation, we have a relocation fund going right now, campaign. That's there, and other ways to give.
And even with the podcast, y'all, Oprah Winfrey asks for people to pay toward podcasts. And let me tell you, she don't need nobody's money. She doesn't
need it.
You know what I'm saying? So, and all the other podcasts I listen to, because sometimes it's hard. It's like, oh, we have to ask for money. But the thing is, we do produce it. Yeah. We pay for it. And all the other podcasts I listen to say, hey, if you are finding value in this and if you'd like to pay it forward, and help sow back into it, we would gladly and humbly receive that with thanks.
Yeah, and we are a 501c3, so we have the ability to send a tax-deductible receipt. So, Melinda, who do we have coming up in this podcast? This interview was like mind-blowing, like almost on a literal level.
Well, you interviewed me, so of course it was mind-blowing. No, we had, I won't insult me or Sarah, but Sarah Theissen, who is a brilliant woman, actually a professional counselor, but now runs something called Splankna, which you're like, what is that? No, it's not like potty training for your cat. Splankna is...
It's actually a Greek word. She's going to talk about that.
Yeah.
We talk so much about the quantum science behind this and energy psychology. We talk so much about that on a foundational level. And just so you know, where she's going to debunk it if you think it's New Age, just listen to the interview, okay? Don't even go there. It's not New Age. This is really fascinating stuff. But we spent so much time with that groundwork and then realized, hey, we're out of time. We need to do another episode. So y'all, this is only part 1. This is laying some groundwork. Do not miss part 2. It's coming out probably in 1 week. I'm going to see if I can pull that off because we are traveling right now and at an event in North Carolina. And so I'm going to try and do that pretty quick, but definitely you want to hear 2 parts of the whole because neither one will stand alone. They need each other. And man, I think you're going to be fascinated with what Sarah says. And I also would encourage you that you may actually want to slow the podcast speed down because Sarah,
I thought I talked fast. She did say that we would probably have to interrupt her. She said that as a caveat. So
yeah,
caveat, not caveat. That's not caviar. Caveat. And she has so much information.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing.
Transformational.
So fascinating.
You'll love it. You'll love it, y'all.
Yeah.
That's what I'm implanting that idea and that truth into your mind.
So we probably should get into it.
Yep.
All right, so here we go with Sarah Theissen of Splankna. Hope you guys enjoy.
All right. Well, we are super excited and honored to have Sarah Theissen with us today. And she has so much to share today. I am very excited to introduce her to you. But before we do, just a little bit about her. This lady is very educated. She is a licensed professional counselor, as well as a marriage and family therapist, and has been really in the healing world for many years. And we were really honored to meet her in person just about a month ago at the AACC, the American Association of Christian Counselors. So we just really liked her. I did. I'll speak for myself. Liked her as soon as I met her, felt a connection. And, when we're in this place of healing, those that are either doing it or have actually founded a model, there's a synergy there. It's like we have this spirit connect. And there's also an energetic connection, which don't freak out when I say energy, y'all, because she's going to unpack what that even means. But she really is going to talk today about, has anyone heard this? Energy psychology. And I'm actually currently reading her book, and it's called Splankna, The Redemption of Healing Energy for the Kingdom of God. And don't turn it off just because you heard healing energy. This is legit, y'all. And I'm telling you, just in the first couple chapters, I'm like, dang, she's like a scientist. If you read her stuff, read her book, you'll be like, oh, this is real. We don't have to be worried. We don't have to be fearful of what this whole healing energy thing is about. But Sarah, we are so excited. We'd love for you just to talk about yourself a little bit and tell us what the heck is Splankna, and what is this about healing energy? Dive right in.
All right. Well, so first of all, really glad to be here too. Super liked you guys when I first met you, as we all had our little "I love you" moment at AACC. So that was fun. So Splankna, energy psychology, is the field of techniques within the bigger umbrella of psych that assumes from the outset that the body of the client is storing and holding all of a person's life experiences at the frequency level. So what I mean by frequency is like down inside the atom, when you're down into like waves and particles and such, at that level of creation, the subatomic level, thought, and therefore emotion and opinion and experience and memory, these things have something like substance, like a signature resonance or frequency down at the tiniest level of things. And the theory is that all human beings, as we go through our lives, our bodies store every little tiny frequency of everything we ever experienced. So our bodies are like walking hard drives of all of our moments in our lives. Now, the field of energy psych comes at change from that level of creation. Whereas most of the time, psych is coming from the conscious mind, right? So you're sitting down with a counselor and you're thinking through an issue or talking about it. You're talking about its origin, how it affects you today. You're talking about the goal, right? But what energy psychology does is it says, so if we began with the assumption that the client's body is holding all the frequencies from an original trauma that has turned into today's symptom, then what if we were to facilitate the body's natural ability to let go of those frequencies one by one? So when a client comes into session, the practitioner, a Splankna practitioner, assumes that not only is the client's body carrying and holding all of that data like a hard drive, but that the Spirit of the Lord sees all of those details, has been there, has been witnessed and present for every moment in that person's life. And that if we had a way to sort of crack open that database, we could trace any symptom from today right down back to its origin, to this symptom, no matter what it is. If it's maybe a shame issue or an addiction or an anxiety disorder, the assumption is that that symptom today had a beginning moment that made sense in original context. And so we would get a regular intake. You'd ask the questions you always would of a person about their history and about the symptom and what their best guess is about its origin and so forth. But then Splankna work really begins by coming together, practitioner and client, before the Lord in prayer. And we are asking him, we're presenting that database that we both carry before him, and asking that he would come and move in his spirit, that he would search through that database. Psalms, especially, several places in the Old Testament, but a lot of places in Psalms, the Spirit of the Lord is talked about as the lamp and the light into secret places, hidden places. The word is keder. It looks like cheddar in the Hebrew. And it's the word for the secret place in the heart, in the soul. And so we're coming before the Lord God and we're saying, would you come and search through my database? Would you come and hover like you did over the waters in creation? Would you hover over every detail I've ever known? And by your living Spirit, would you mark out in me the spot you want to go work on today? And when we come out, there's, of course, many other elements in that opening prayer: the submission of the will before the Lord, the removal and handling of warfare. All sorts of elements are always involved in opening prayer. But the gist is that invitation and the trust that the Lord God, who watches over and observes every moment of all of our lives, not only sees the origin of the issue we're working on, but that by his nature, by his character, he is interested in that kind of an invitation. That there really isn't any circumstance in our lives where we could come before the Lord and invite him literally to come do whatever he would like to do in me, where he would respond with, "Nah, you're good." Like he's interested in that invitation and he will meet us in that. And so when we come out of that opening prayer, we're making a simple assumption in faith, simply believing together that he moved on that invitation, and that the client's body, the deep soul, psych today would call it the subconscious, has awareness live of where in my database the Spirit of the Lord just marked out. Where are we going? Literally, what age in my history? How many emotions one by one did I feel in that moment and store in the body at the frequency level? And so the work with Splankna, the work begins, we utilize what's called muscle response testing or muscle testing to give the client's body a way to respond to ideas. So I'll sidetrack a second into muscle testing. The theory behind muscle testing is that any major muscle in the body that's well isolated, we use a deltoid muscle, any muscle in the body will respond to energetic shifts that go off in the body. So if you thought of the body's energy or electrical system like as if it was always in a state of either congruence or incongruence, it's moving back and forth sort of between tension and resolve. Anytime that you cause one of those movements in state, you cause the body's energy system to shift from congruent to incongruent or back and forth, either way. An isolated muscle will respond to that shift in state by slightly deactivating electrically, just for a millisecond. So the way that looks live is the client is facing the practitioner and he or she is holding an arm forward, just in a 90-degree angle, locked elbow toward the practitioner. Now, a normal, regular arm that isn't responding to energetic shifts, if you hold that arm strong and the practitioner were to press down on a wrist, the deltoid muscle, the shoulder muscle, will kind of resist a little naturally. It'll sort of bounce back. But if you had the client say something, for instance, that they are incongruent with. Like if you had a female look you in the eye and say, I'm a male. The simple incongruence of that idea, the mismatch of the frequency with reality, it causes this tiny little tweak and the muscle will electrically deactivate just for a split second. And so when the practitioner presses on that muscle, instead of holding strong, it will give. And this isn't a logical shift. It's an electrical shift that happens in the body. It's just physics in God's original design. And so because a muscle will respond that way, and by the way, a muscle test is a very imperfect tool. There are a lot of variables that can come into play in whether a muscle stays strong or goes weak. Truth and congruence is only one of those variables. And so muscle testing is a fragile but useful tool as long as it is very much submitted under the authority and the lead of the Holy Spirit. So once we have invited the Spirit of the Lord to come and search through the database, the Spirit of the Lord will come in and hover over all the details of a person's life and highlight one spot. He will mark out, I want to go right here, this day, these emotions, this memory, right? And so the muscle test is a way that I can give the client's system, so body, soul, spirit, subconscious, the whole being, a way to respond to these ideas. So literally, I would muscle test through questions like, so what age are we going to? Are we looking at a moment in time between conception to birth, or birth to 5 to 10, so forth? We identify the age, and then we begin one by one to identify each emotion that the person felt in that moment in time. And one by one, the client will literally hold on their own body. They'll just touch on their body the acupuncture point where that particular emotion is stored as a frequency in the body. Many, many cultures over many, many years, long before me, this is not my design, long before me, there's been a lot of wide agreement around many cultures about what type of emotional content tends to be stored in what places in the body. And so we're borrowing from, piggybacking on many, many others and their research over a lot of years. So one by one, the client will tune into each emotion and they're holding the point on their body while they're thinking about that particular memory and how they felt that way in the moment of the memory. And that combination of touch in the acupuncture system combined with intention when I am thinking about or remembering or imagining a particular memory content, that combination of touch and intention is a prompt to the body to let go of the frequency itself. So literally, it's as if the body catches on to that prompt and lets go of the frequency of emotion. For instance, if I was trying to recover from intense grief, I would hold the acupuncture point at the lung meridian, for instance, because that's where the body holds grief. And I would I would remember that memory and the grief I felt at the time. And that combination of touch and thought triggers the body to let go of the frequency. And so it's like an electrical charge of the emotion itself, of the grief, releases out of the body and dissipates. All of our human brains work this way, where we experience and interpret, we make sense of all of our sensory experiences through the lens of everything else we've ever experienced. So if I have a height trauma in my history and I walk over and look down a 4-story, 20-story window, when my eye sees the height, the distance between me and the ground, what it does is it will double click like files of all of my associations with height. And if I have strong associations of fear with height, then it's as if that file gets double clicked and up to my screen comes all this intense emotion of fear, even if my logical mind says in that same moment, man, this is such a dumb fear. It drives me nuts. I know I'm safe to be at the window, right? Now, all of us have tons of these sorts of moments in a regular day where if I could freeze frame this moment and step out of it and just observe it from my logical brain, I would be able to tell that I'm overreacting in one way or another. This moment calls for maybe a 3 on a 1 to 10 scale, but I'm feeling something more like an 8. Well, those moments happen all the time. And that's because in that moment in time, I am responding not just to what's happening live, but to all of the associated memories in my history that are double clicked when something familiar happens like that again, right? And so in talk therapy, the best I can do is sort of get better and better at managing that double-clicked trigger when it comes up to my screen. I can get better at talking myself through it. I can get better at restoring my history. I can do all sorts of calming techniques, right? But with mind-body work, with energy psych, you can actually go into the original height file, right? The place in me that holds all my associations with the trigger, in this case, height. And we can sort of crack that file open and clean out all the frequencies one by one of the original traumas related to height. So that now, when I walk to that same 10-story window, I see the height. It will still double click my height file. My system, my brain will still say, what are all my associations with height? What does this concept mean to me? But now, when all of those original traumas, the one where I fell off the bed, for instance, when that emotion comes up on my screen, now it comes up clean. It comes up with the memory, but without the very strong emotional charge that used to be attached to the memory. Because in Splankna therapy, we went in one by one and helped the body to let go of each emotional charge. So the memory remains the same, but the emotional attachment neutralizes.
Wow. That is so powerful. Because obviously, I think a lot of people have heard by now of Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. Because I don't think that we understand that at that energy level, that everything is stored, and you've communicated that so well about how it's a database, it's a file, we're going to double click on it. So well put. Yeah. And I do feel like this is the $1 million question, because I know that we have a very wide variety of people that listen to our podcast, and some are very new to inner healing in general, and some may have some pretty conservative opinions or perspectives on it. And so when you talk about energy psych, when you talk about Splankna dealing with this energy level, I know there are probably some people with the red flags flying right now, like, oh, this sounds new age. Oh, this is like radars going off, like, oh, wait, warning. And so I would love to give you the opportunity, Sarah, to unpack why this is not hooey gooey new age, and what because you're talking science. This is not even like somebody's opinion of science. This is science. And so just you explained this to us a little bit when we saw you at the AACC, and thought you did such a brilliant job of really putting this in a package that even the most conservative among us could potentially at least allow themselves to consider as viable. So I'm going to turn that back to you. I know Melinda wants to add to that, but
yeah, I want to add to that. And that's exactly appropriate, Kathy. And I just want to add to that. If you could define a couple of terms for us, energy and frequency, because I think that even that word energy scares people, and frequency scares people. You've mentioned both. And I'd also like you to mention meridian, because it's in your book, and meridian points. So these words that are commonly associated with New Age, right. If you could just kind of give us, like Kathy was saying, to help bridge that between, we don't need to be afraid of this. If you could give us simple definitions of those words that often, like Kathy said, bring up those red flags.
Right. Okay. So first of all, I want to back up a second. Kathy, you were saying this is science, not someone's opinion. Now, I want to speak to that for a second really quick, because technically this would be actually in the realm of pseudoscience. Not because it's someone's opinion, but because the level of creation that we're talking about here. So down inside the atom, the smallest building block of creation that we guess is down there, right? We actually don't have tools. I say as, the human race. I am not a physicist, but we don't have tools yet to visibly observe that kind of level of creation. So the physicists, the reason that the entire field of quantum physics even exists is because the math works. So the whole category of physics is all based on the math that is very elegant and reliable in creation. And so what the physicists do is if you were working with an atom, with a molecule, we make guesses based on the math about how things might work down inside the atom at the smallest level, in there where we can't really observe it. And so what we do is the physicists will say, so if things down inside the atom work like we think they do, then we should be able to do intervention A on this atom and have result B occur. And very, very reliably, result B does occur, but we don't actually get to observe A turn into B because we don't have any way to see down that small yet. So for those who do understand the science out there, I just wanted to admit that caveat, that the whole field of quantum physics is technically still guesswork, existing only as solidly as it does because the math works really, really well. So we've got to be at least close to what's happening inside the atom, or the math wouldn't work that well. So that said, energy. First of all, I was that conservative Christian. I came up in the Church of Christ. I was the last person. I still think of myself as the last person God would ever have chosen to develop this, because when he first began to try and knock on my door about this issue, I resisted that and kept thinking, well, that can't be God, because all of that mind-body stuff is New Age witchcraft. We all know that. That can't be a prompt from the Lord. So I ignored and resisted that for a long time until he was just persistent enough for a long enough period that I finally said, okay, if this is you, I will look into it or something. I'll see what you're trying to get me to learn here, And it was actually from an experience where he gave me a moment where I saw a person change in front of me in an hour and a half's time or so. I saw a person go from paralyzed phobic to release and freedom in front of me. So I couldn't walk away and deny that there had to be something real going on there. And that actually is how I began to ask all of these questions of, where are you in this kind of part of the world? This whole set of ways of thinking and of techniques, this whole world of energy work. Where are you in here? Where are you not? And when I began to ask those questions, I didn't at all have in my mind a goal of developing a protocol that would be taught to thousands of people, that would be an institute. I was just trying to respond to and obey what I understood to be the prompt and direction of the Lord to ask these questions, and really to discover their answers, to get as much clarity about those questions as I could, to see as much change in my clients as I could without crossing out of spiritual boundaries. So the conservative thing, people who hear this kind of deal and say, well, that can't be of the Lord, that's out of boundaries. I understand that way of thinking. I was there. So for those who feel that way, I really do hope that you would give the book a chance, that you would read it, because most of the time it really does set those kinds of fears to rest. So your other question about frequency. So frequency and energy. Believers tend to hear the word energy and instantly associate every negative frame of both New Age thinking and Eastern philosophy. Again, understandably, because that's by and large most of the usage of that word. However, the word energy is not mystical in its origin. The word energy is a physics term. So the way it came about was the physicists they recognize, again, via the math for the most part. There is a very famous study called the double slit screen test that I discuss in the book. But mostly because of the math, the evidence appears that inside the atom, down in the tiniest center of it, there is kind of frantic motion. There's all of this wild movement going on at the inside of every atom. Now, we know from macro physics, meaning physics of everything from the atom up, bigger than the atom, right? So Newtonian physics or Galilean, the kind of physics we had that helped us discover we could split the atom for the atom bomb. We know from macro physics that in order to have motion, you've got to have force, right? Remember from high school physics, high school science, right? The law of inertia, that an object at rest will tend to stay at rest. An object in motion will tend to stay in motion, right? So if there's a soda can on my table, that soda can is not going to move unless force is applied to it. Either I have to push it with my hand, or if the table tilted and gravity got hold of it and pulled it, there has to be some kind of force for it to move. So the physicists observe all of this motion that's happening at the center of every atom, look for the force and can't find it. So from a physics point of view, without being a believer in Jesus, just the observation of the fabric of creation down at that smallest level says, this is really mysterious. This is kind of baffling. We've got all this motion, but we can't identify any sort of force. What is pushing, what is moving around all of the center of everything? Well, as physicists, we don't really know. We can't identify the force, so we're going to call it energy. So energy is actually a physics term in its origin. It's not a mystical term. Now, as believers, if you were to tell a believer who knows the word, so guess what? We have peered in as best we can so far to the tiniest level of the building blocks of creation. And what we find is we find motion that we can't explain. The believer will say, well, I can explain it. I know from the word that it is the ongoing active will of the creator that literally holds all things together, that organizes and arranges and watches over and stewards every tiny little thing. If the center of creation is in motion, it's because he is willing it to be in motion and actively, in an ongoing way. Right? He's willing that to be in motion. And the amazing, remarkable thing that the secular community has beaten us to, which just bites me, is we, because of the discoveries in quantum physics, it appears that not only does intention and emotion and thought have some kind of a frequency at the subatomic level, but because of that, every human being, every single time we think anything or feel anything or believe anything or hope for anything or expect anything, all of our intention in all of its different forms, those frequencies are sort of pulsing out of us all the time. We're like points of influence on the globe. And those are like contributions into sort of the larger soup of reality. The secular community has beaten us to this punch that our intention impacts reality. What we think, what we feel, what we believe, what we practice, it impacts reality. So I just can't help it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit here, if you let me, about the double slit screen test, because it's too much fun not to tell you. So this amazing test.
Okay, I have to interrupt you.
Okay.
Yes, you're just so fun. I'm like, I love it. And I'm like,
I told you I'd overtalk.
And you said to interrupt you, but I feel like it's like a speedboat. So if anyone needs to like just take a deep breath, I wonder if they can put you on like, you know how you speed things up when it's like a really long thing, they need to slow you down and go, we're going to put it on like 75% speed so I can really listen.
I get that a lot.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And I want to before you, somewhere in there, if you could share a testimony, because you shared a testimony about the lady in the elevator. And so I'd love for you to, I don't want to interrupt you about this flow, but if you could also interject that testimony that this stuff works, y'all, even if you don't understand everything that she's saying. And you're talking like quantum science here. You're talking quantum, at the quantum level, which, as your book explains, we don't even have technology to measure that. We don't have a microscope that could look at the quantum level, but it's becoming more and more, validated and verified by even secular scientists. Like you were saying, it's not like hokey pokey, whatever. We just don't have the technology to even go that tiny. So,
but what we do have is fruit. And so that's the story you're referring to. So this is how God sort of forced me against my will to go down this road about 22 or so years ago. So I went to Abilene Christian University, got an undergraduate in Bible and graduate degree in marriage and family therapy, moved out to Denver to take a job with Samaritan Counseling Center. And when I got out here, someone at church said, "Oh, you should meet Dr. Brian Martin, a chiropractor at the time, an elder in our church at it was Metro Church, Community Church at the time." I went to see him because I had this annoying morning cough, and someone said, "Oh, you should see him. He could probably help with it." Now, I had never been to a chiropractor. I didn't have any experience yet in anything holistic. I wasn't raised in that sort of thinking at all. I grew up in LA, and there's not, at the time, was not much of a holistic culture out there. And so I go to see Dr. Brian, and he, without really explaining at all what he was doing, he had me lay down on my back on the chiropractor table, and he said, "Hold your arm in real strong to your side." So he starts muscle testing me. I know now, I didn't know at the time. He asks me to think about, hold a few points, think about a couple things, ages and emotions and such. And it all seemed kind of hokey and ridiculous to me. And at the end of this appointment, he said, he had asked me during it, who I am, what I do, my profession. And at the end of it, he looked me in the eye and said, "You don't know it, but you really want to learn this." And I said, "Thank you, but I really don't." And so I left and went on with my life. And he would come up to me every Sunday for about a year and bug me about, "Oh, you've got to come to this training with me," or, "Hey, I've got this article you've got to read," or, "Let me tell you the story about a client." And so he just would not get off my case. And finally, and this is the whole time when I'm resisting this, saying this whole mind body thing is not of the Lord. So after about a year, he comes up and says, "Come to this one training with me. It's right here in Arvada. It's just a weekend long." So I go up with him. Dr. Roberta Wilkins. We go up to her office, and turns out we arrive on Friday morning for our weekend training, and Brian and I are the only ones there, which you can imagine is not encouraging, particularly when you're already thinking this stuff is all, wacko and out of place. So she teaches us through this weekend, she teaches us a protocol called thought field therapy, which is better known now as EFT, or emotional freedom technique. And it has to do with tapping along mostly the face, a little bit of the torso, tapping in different points. And the different orders that you use, that you tap through these acupuncture points, are supposedly supposed to help the body release different sort of larger categories of emotional content. So she gives us all of this. I think it's so ridiculous. I can't believe I gave up a weekend and paid for it. I was pretty mad at myself for letting Brian talk me into it. So I dropped the whole thing, ignored it, wrote it off as kind of dumb. About a month later, I went down to the Catholic church down in Colorado Springs. I had a contract with them at the time to go down 2 days a week and work with folks that they would refer to me. So I had been doing talk therapy with a married couple for a while. And this was our closing session. They were moving to Hawaii. And so she started talking after session about how afraid she was to fly. And thought field therapy, this training I'd had a month earlier, was supposed to be really great at phobias, particularly simple phobias, like a fear of flying. And so I said something super intriguing, like, I just got this training. It's supposed to be so great at phobias. I don't think it'll work, but do you want to try it? And had to be looking back, God, because she was like, "Sure, let's try it." And so I walked her through the steps like I was supposed to, like Dr. Wilkins said would be useful, So she was supposed to tune into her emotional distress. How strong can you feel this fear on a 1 to 10 scale when you imagine being on a plane? And every time I would walk her through the little series of tapping, I would check into her number again. And what the training said was each time through, the person's number should lower by 2. It should move down to an 8, and then a 6, and then a 4, and so forth. Well, she didn't know that. I didn't tell her that, but that was what she was reporting to me. So I'm thinking, okay, sure. So she gets down to the end of this where she can't find the fear anymore. And she says, "Well, yeah, but I'm not on a plane. If I was on a plane." And I said, "Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too." And she said, "Well, but I have another phobia that we can test. I'm also deathly afraid of elevators." Now, in the building where we were, there was an elevator. So by now we're like a half hour past session. We're just sort of four-wheeling on our own time, So I said, "All right, so tune back into this new fear. Think about the fear of the elevator. What's your 1 to 10 scale?" and so forth. We went through the whole process again till she got to where she couldn't find the fear anymore. So I said, "So you want to go try it?" We got up and we're walking down the hall. Her husband's with her, and they had a little baby girl sleeping on his shoulder. So we're walking down the hall, small talking about whatever. We turn the corner and she gets to where she's in visual range of the elevator, which was a long hallway away from us. And just the visual sight of the elevator and knowing that we were on our way to test it, she hits the floor in anxiety, like completely freaks out in front of me. So I'm standing over her as she's basically having a panic attack on the floor in front of me. And I'm thinking, this does not look promising. But, we're in it at this point. So I'm like, all right, so look me in the eye, keep breathing. Come on, tap right here, follow me. I just kind of force her, in the middle of her upset to go, stay with me here. So we keep tapping through. She calms down, gets all okay again. And little by little, we work that process until I don't know how long later, maybe another half hour later, her husband and I are standing in front of the elevators, watching the little lights on the top of the doors, show the floor she's on. And we're watching her go up and down the floors. And she'd come down, the door would open, and she's sort of laughing. And she'll go, I'm going again. And she would hit it again and shut the door and go up again. And her husband is standing there looking at the numbers going, I can't believe it. I mean, the whole time I've ever known her, she's never been, I can't believe it. And I'm standing next to him going, I can't either. And that night, I drove home. I drove back from Colorado Springs up to Denver where I lived. And you would think I would have been excited, but I was more upset than anything else, actually. I was pretty because I didn't understand what had just happened and why it had happened. And so I was just calling out to the Lord, like, wait, what is happening? Did I just cross over some line without realizing it? Or did I just get in trouble myself and possibly get her in trouble? What are we doing here? It's one thing for something to quote work, right? I can get a Ouija board or a psychic to work. But if something working doesn't mean that it's of you. I need to know why it worked. And so on the one hand, I wasn't able to dive in because I didn't have those answers. And those issues, those questions are far too serious to be casual with. And on the other hand, I couldn't walk away from what I just saw and go, oh, well, whatever. It was such a remarkable thing to experience so I was very stuck in this sort of rock and a hard place of I'm arrested by what I saw. I don't understand it. I don't know where to go from here. There isn't anyone to ask, because the only people who knew anything about those kinds of tools didn't know Jesus. And the people who know Jesus, it's not like there was a pastor I could go ask and say, so Pastor so-and-so, where is God in these things, right? Because pastors probably, for the most part, wouldn't have known what I was talking about anyway. And if they got a gist, they would write it all off as not of the Lord. So I was very alone in it. And it began about a 7-year period, I would say, of asking the questions and pushing into the word, pushing into trial and error, spending just time alone in prayer, trying to listen. I did seek godly counsel along the way, even though I usually sounded like I was all Greek to them. But and during that whole period of time, it was as the clarity began to come together, it surprised me really, because I thought in the beginning that when I first submitted and said, okay, I hear you. I get that you're asking me to ask these questions. I will take this path. I'll ask these. I'll dive in. I really thought that at the other end of that journey, what I would end up with would be sort of like a chart. Like, here are the 12 different schools of thought around energy psych, and most of them are bad, and these 2 are okay. Like, I really thought the clarity would come out that way. And I was so surprised to find that it didn't come out that way at all. Speaking to Kathy, your whole question about the believers out there and anyone who is hearing New Age and this sort of language, right? That was where I was too. And so asking that question, where are you? Where does the line go between what you created and your intention in creating it and getting into New Age philosophy, practice, theology, right? And so as that began to get clearer, I was surprised to find how foundational and how simple that clarity was. Because in order to ask that question, where is the New Age? Where does it start into New Age? We have to back up for a second and define that term. So not only do we have to think about defining terms like energy, most believers who would look at something like Splankna and say, that's New Age, most believers aren't quite sure how to define New Age. They aren't quite sure what they mean by that accusation. So we really do need to back up together as brothers and sisters in Christ to those kinds of definitions first. Because what makes New Age is not a particular set of language. It's not, there's nothing I can do with my body. There's no place I can tap that inherently is against the Lord. He's the one who made my body. If my body has frequency or an energy electrical system, I use those like a slash, by the way, because both of them are metaphorical, really. They're kind of loose gists because we don't get to look at this whole level under a microscope yet. So if my body has a system like this, it's only there because the Lord God created it to be there for his good glory, for his purposes. So anything we can observe in creation is never the issue. It's the conclusions we end up drawing about those observations where we get into trouble. So what makes New Age is not anything we can observe, either in the body or the way the body responds to things like the combination of touch and thought, right? Where we get into New Age is in the interpretations about who God is, and therefore who we are. Those interpretations that we draw out of what we observe in creation, that's where we get into trouble. What makes New Age is the theology and any practices that come out of this theology, but the theology that says God, the concept of God, is nothing more than the sum of all creation, or sort of the big homogeneous vibe that organizes the universe, holds everything together, the chi or the energy, or, like in Star Wars, the force, right? The theology that makes New Age, that makes any practice New Age, is the belief that God has no personhood. He's not separate fundamentally from what he's created. That because he's just the energy and I am made up of that same energy, then therefore I am God the same way everyone else is, and so is the rock and the tree and the bird, right? It's the theology behind that way of thinking, not the practices themselves, that are the issue.
That's a lot to chew on.
It is a lot to chew.
That is.
And you know what? Something that Brian Orm, we interviewed him a couple weeks ago. You didn't necessarily mention Eastern philosophy or anything, but we often think of anything from the East as evil. And it's like God created everything in creation that is edifying and for our benefit and for our health. He created it. And he did mention, Brian said, people think that mysticism, and he debunked or unpacked what that even means.
I'd like to hear that.
Oh, you should listen to it.
Podcast. Yeah.
But but he was saying that Christianity is not a Western religion. We're so scared of anything Eastern. That's and it's true. Like, where do you think Christianity started? It's not from North America, know? Right. And so even like Eastern medicine, well, oh my goodness, it's been around before Western medicine, that's for sure.
Yes.
And so
sometimes Christians say the word Eastern like a cuss word.
They do. It's
Eastern.
It invokes this fear.
Wasn't Jesus from the Middle East?
Well,
something
not
like
only
that. I thought he was from Canada, but anyway.
We got to back up with thoughts like that and realize what we're really saying if we say that something out of the East can't be godly. What you're saying then is you're saying that somebody who doesn't consciously know Jesus as Lord is incapable of accurately observing creation. Are we really willing to say that? Because that's not a very rational position.
That's really interesting. I'm going to play that over myself just to say, yes. Can you say that again, Sarah? Because that was really profound.
When we say that anything Eastern can't be godly because of their religious point of view, right? What we're saying, if we really look into the background of that logic, we're saying that somebody who doesn't know Jesus as Lord is literally incapable of accurately observing creation. And that's irrational. That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. No, it doesn't. I feel like we could unpack that statement for days. So I'm just going to come to Denver and hang out so we could talk over several meals. But did you ever even define the word Splankna? I'm not sure you did.
Oh, no. Well, yeah, I didn't describe why it's called this hideous word, Splankna. But I also didn't even get to the best part of Splankna. All we talked was the science. We didn't even talk the spirit.
Okay.
So
Wait a second. Wait. Before you keep going, we are already at like 45 minutes, and I'm wondering, can we just call this part 1?
Sure.
And then we'll just do part 2 for the next.
We've got to. This is so good.
All right. See, we told you were going to be having your minds blown, and
that was it to be continued.
Yeah, and we're leaving you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah, you know it. It's like wait, and then you see your favorite show, and it's like to be continued leaves that. Or but what's even worse is when it's the end of a season and they leave someone
the cliffhanger,
and then you have to wait like 5 months for the next year. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
this is not that long of a wait.
Nope, we'll have it to you probably in 1 week if I can pull it off, but definitely no later than 2 weeks. And this is kind of our season finale, so we're going out with a bang with Sarah Theissen, and I know you guys have your heads a spin. We're going to get you the second half coming really quickly. Make sure that you are subscribed so you do not miss it. Make sure you share it with your friends and have some healthy discussion about it.
Yeah,
because it's
let
pretty
us
amazing.
know what kind of conversation. I wish we could all sit around a campfire. Ooh,
come on.
Campfire, that smells
Hey, listen,
so
when
good.
we get settled in Simpsonville, we're going to have people over to do
have
that.
a campfire.
You can come visit. Come on.
Maybe we'll see you along the way when we're driving across the whole
There
entire
you go.
country.
There you go.
Anyway.
Hang tight for part 2, and we will see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you for joining us today. If you're enjoying this podcast, please share it with your friends.
And please stay tuned for more great content coming your way.